Hi, I'm Tim Constantine, and from Washington, D.C., this is the Capitol Hill Show. The 2024 presidential race has come down to the two major party candidates. The Republicans have chosen the 45th president, Donald J. Trump, as their nominee, and the Democrats have chosen Vice President Kamala Harris. As voters step into the booth this fall, there'll be a lot of issues they will consider, including the economy, immigration, and the border. And there's one sleeper issue. Racial issues in the United States always play a role in the outcome of an election. Black Americans typically and overwhelmingly vote for the Democrat candidate. The 2024 United States presidential race has come down to the two major party candidates, former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. Many issues will impact voters' decisions in choosing their next president. Among those issues, the economy, the border and immigration, and even the candidates' personalities. One of the sleeper issues, however, is racial relations. Black Americans have typically and overwhelmingly voted Democrat. The most pronounced was when Barack Obama ran for president in 2008.
This election had many firsts and many stories that will be told for generations, but one that's on my mind tonight is about a woman who cast her ballot in Atlanta. She is a lot like the millions of others who stood in line to make their voice heard in this election, except for one thing. Ann Nixon Cooper is 106 years old. She was born just a generation past slavery, a time when there were no cars on the road or planes in the sky. When someone like her couldn't vote for two reasons, because she was a woman and because of the color of her skin. And tonight, I think about all that she's seen throughout her century in America. The heartache and the hope, the struggle and the progress. The times we were told that we can't, and the people who pressed on with that American creed, yes, we can.
That year, 95% of black voters chose Barack Obama. Black Americans made up about 13% of the United States population then, meaning that when 19 out of 20 black voters voted for Obama, they had a huge impact on the overall race. Clearly, race matters in American elections. To have a meaningful discussion about race in America, one needs to understand the history. The United States was founded at a time when slavery was common and legal in many parts of the world, unimaginable today. It was a serious point of argument from America's very first day. Multiple states wanted to outlaw slavery. Southern states, however, did not. Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States, called for an end to slavery in one of his State of the Union speeches. It would not be outlawed, of course, until nearly 60 years later, and only after a bloody civil war. Even then, race issues persisted. A full 100 years later, the civil rights movement took hold.
I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Martin Luther King Jr. led a national effort, ultimately sacrificing his own life in the process. In the years since, America has matured and race relations have improved dramatically.
Look at the faces here around you, and you see an America that is more fair and more free and more just than the one Dr. King addressed that day. We are right to savor that slow but certain progress. Progress that's expressed itself in a million ways, large and small, across this nation every single day.
The Gallup polling organization polls Americans on the issues of race relations every single year. By 2007, the year before Barack Obama was elected, 71% of Americans felt race relations were somewhat good or very good. Only 28% felt racial relations were somewhat or very bad. In 2008, when America elected its first black president, hope ran high that he could narrow that divide even more.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President. All the best wishes.
Oddly, exactly the opposite happened. By Barack Obama's final year in office as president, in 2016, Americans who thought race relations were somewhat bad or very bad had nearly doubled to 46%. Forward then to 2024. Multiple polls showed Donald Trump, the Republican, earning 22% of the black vote. Nowhere near a majority, but a huge increase from the 2008 Republican candidate John McCain's 5%. The narrative from the left about Donald Trump is that he is a racist. In the 2020 election, Trump had to deal with the fallout of the killing of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police.
Thank you.
Stop moving. Mama.
All over America, riots broke out. Cities were burned. Chaos ensued. Police everywhere were vilified, and the finger was often pointed at Donald Trump.
What I saw was not good, very bad.
Maxine Waters has served in the United States Congress since 1991 and is an outspoken civil rights activist. I asked her point blank if Donald Trump is a racist.
He knows he is. Absolutely. Everybody knows it, even those that don't admit it. You can't help but know it. I mean, he's dog whistling every day, to his constituency who are being fed all of this racism and hatred, etc. Of course he is.
Is Trump really a racist, though? I spoke with former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under Donald Trump, Dr. Ben Carson. Carson worked with Mr. Trump for 4 years. It has started again. Since Kamala Harris has been chosen as the nominee of the Democratic Party, then the questions have started already. Oh, is Donald Trump a racist? What evidence did you see that Donald Trump is a racist?
I didn't see any evidence of it at all. I saw him treating everybody quite equally. I noticed in his history that he got a special award from Jesse Jackson because of the tremendous help he had been to the Black community in the area. When he moved to Palm Beach, he was the one who opened his club, the Blacks and Jews. All the clubs were closed to them, and he pushed for that to happen throughout the area. Those are generally not the marks of a racist individual.
You mentioned the Black community with housing, but at the same time, the Black unemployment rate was the lowest it has ever been under Trump. He's been criticized recently for talking about illegal immigrants taking Black jobs. And the joke has been, what's a Black job? Are we missing the point here? It's not about just a specific job for a specific race. I think we're talking that any job, anywhere, but you tell me what you saw. What's the difference there? And what did the president mean when he said immigrants are taking Black jobs? He was speaking to a Black group when he said it.
Yeah, well, he's talking about people who are in the lower socioeconomic rungs of our society are the ones who are most impacted when we let illegals come in, because then they're in the same pool that's competing for those unskilled jobs. It's unfortunate that the Black Americans tend to have a overrepresentation in that group, but that's changing. They've made an enormous progress, but it still is the case. So that's what he's talking about. But when people don't have a good argument, what do? They seize upon something like an identity, or they start calling you names rather than trying to understand what you're actually saying. They're not stupid enough that they don't know what he was actually trying to say. It may have been said in a way that opens itself up to criticism, but they knew exactly what he was talking about.
I saw a poll this week talking about black voters in America, and it was critical of Trump, saying he only had 22% support in the black community. And I thought, wait, when Mitt Romney ran, he had, I think, 4% support. So 22% is a huge jump. Obviously, you'd love to get a bigger number, but how important is that number in November?
It's very important for him to really go across all demographics. One of the things about Trump's policies is they are based on the philosophy that a rising tide lifts all boats. And rather than getting into identity politics and saying this group has been disadvantaged, so let's give them an advantage over this group, all that does is foster resentment. You'll never get to where you need to be if you go on the basis of let's correct this wrong by doing wrong to another group. Two wrongs don't make a right. And he understands that. And I think a lot of people understand that. When he had that big rally in the South Bronx, and it was a rainbow of people from all backgrounds, that just shows you that he's not being one of those typical politicians who caters to just one group. He's somebody who has policies that appeal to everybody. And everybody knows that during the Trump administration, things were affordable and you had hope, and people could buy homes, and the American dream was alive and well. And look how quickly that is changing just in the last 3.5 to 4 years. And you look at a place like Venezuela. Venezuela was a beautiful place, #1 economy in South America. I went there a number of times, beautiful resorts and hotels and museums. And the biggest thing that people argued about was whether or not they were the most beautiful people in the world. We've had the most Miss Universes. I mean, that's what they talked about. And look what happened to them. Now they're at the bottom of the scale, people fleeing.
You mentioned identity politics, and I know the census did not fall under HUD, but each year, every 10 years when the United States does its census, and loves to point out that's required by law, we've broken that down to this point where rather than simply seeing how many people live in a household and trying to determine what the needs of that general number are, the census looks at all kinds of things, including race, color, age, and so on. Is there an argument to be made for that, or is there an argument to be made against why the census breaks us down by identity rather than simply focusing on all those people being Americans?
Well, I think it will indicate that we have matured substantially when we stop doing that and we just look at people as people. You have to think back to the early days of our country when there were people here from many different countries. They frequently ended up in communities that were isolated, maybe 50 or 100 families. And they could barely talk to each other because they spoke different languages. But they understood something very important. It's called the common good. That's a phrase that was used frequently by our founders. Those things that work for everybody. And we need to get back to that in our country, because the thing that can destroy this country, as great as we are, is division. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And those who want to fundamentally change us know that in order to do that, they have to destroy the unity that exists in our country. And that's why they drive wedges between us on the basis of race, age, income, gender, political affiliation, religion, you name it, drive wedge, separate the people, control the various factions.
Which candidate, then, is best positioned to unify America? Congressman Waters is quite sure.
I think we're arriving at a time when we're sick and tired of division. We're sick and tired of racism. We're sick and tired of hatred. And yes, I do think that one of the things that we're going to see from this team, led by Kamala, is an attempt to bring us all together. I think that's going to be central to her campaign.
Ironically, it was the Republicans that took leadership on ending slavery and 100 years later drove the train passing American civil rights legislation. Why then is the black community supporting Democrats? Chicago community activist Jitu Brown is the national director of the Journey for Justice Alliance. He shared with us the different issues that are facing his community.
We have a quote that says, the foundation of any nation are the institutions that lay the structure for the people's development. So it's important that our institutions support our growth as opposed to sabotage our growth. So in education is dramatically underfunded. And you can look at race and class and you can see the disparities. We're calling for full funding for public education and support for the massive expansions of community schools. The landmark investment that President Biden made, called the Elementary and Secondary Emergency Response Act, we're saying should become standard for public education. We should not be trying to educate children on the cheap, right? If we're truly concerned about the future of our country, we should be pouring resources into our young people as opposed to nickel and diming them, right? Well, we're also talking about youth investment. So we're saying that any young person that wants a summer job should be able to get one in this country. And one of the ways that we can inspire investment in young people is to provide tax breaks for small businesses that hire 16 to 24-year-olds, right? So those are a couple of the policies that are part of our quality of life platform that we develop by actually going into communities, working class communities, brown communities, black communities, and asking them, how is racism or how is inequity impacted this institution in your life? And then what are your recommendations?
He had a list of issues facing major cities in America. Brown explains how the minority experience is often different.
See, some people don't have to worry about a slumlord, right? They've never encountered a person who gouges your rent while providing you mediocre services in regards to your living conditions. Most people don't know what it's like to have a liquor store in every corner of your block, to have the life discrepancy between you and your white friends be 30 years in the same city. Because in your neighborhood, you don't have health care. In your neighborhood, you have fried chicken places and fish places, but you don't have grocery stores. Your child doesn't know what it's like to hold a pomegranate, right? So those things are structural. And we're saying that what's important in our quality of life agenda is to begin to be honest about those different disparities. And here are some of our recommendations.
Jitu says even healthcare isn't the same.
We've seen massive closures of hospitals. And in this historic community called Bronzeville, we've had two that were significant. One was Michael Reese Hospital, which is closed. That's less than a mile from where we're standing right now. Then the first black hospital ever built in the United States, Providence Hospital, was started by Dr. Daniel Hale Williams, the first man to perform successful surgery on the human heart, was taken over by the county when it closed, but it is a struggling safety net hospital now. And then the hospital that we're standing in is Mercy Hospital, the oldest hospital in the city of Chicago, where I was born, where my siblings were born, right? And one of the safest places for black women to give birth, an award-winning OBGYN program. We had to do, in the middle of the pandemic, where we're 30% of Chicago, but we're 70% of the deaths, we had this healthcare conglomerate called Trinity Health Systems, $13 billion healthcare conglomerate. They own 87 other hospitals around the country, decide they were going to close Mercy. And we had to fight very hard to stop and make them sell it. We had to pressure the governor of the state to make sure that they were able to sell it to someone that would actually do right by the community. So now Mercy Hospital is called Insight, but it is a place that is like where the community won. There were interests that said they were going to close this hospital. They're wiping their hands of it, and the community said that's not what you're going to do. We're going to have health care in this community, and you're going to sell it. And so this is sort of a place where self-determination won, and it lives.
Mr. Brown laid out bluntly the different life experiences for many black Americans.
I think the easy way to look at it, I was in a room, and I don't want to make anybody angry with this, so please don't come looking for me, but I was in a room with a kind of a mixed group of activists, And I said, I want to ask my white friend something. I said, how many of you all grew up with a grocery store in your neighborhood? Most of them raised their hand. I said, how many of you all have never been roughed up by the police? Most of them raised their hand. I said, how many of you don't have a liquor store in every corner of your block? Most of them raised their hand. So how many of y'all went to decent schools, had hospitals? So how many sit-ins did you have to do to get it? How many times did you have to get arrested to get it? And they looked at me, and the point was that everything that we have to get, we have to fight, claw, and scratch to get, right? Whereas for some Americans, it's given. And it's not a handout, it's what's deserved because you're a taxpayer. That's all we're talking about. Equity, right? Don't sabotage our quality of life by killing our basic quality of life institutions, right?
Brown advocates for zero tolerance for poverty, regardless of race.
For us, race plays a huge role kind of in what we see, especially in a city that's segregated like Chicago. You see kind of the tale of two cities. But I think it's saying as human beings, what does every child deserve? As human beings, what should every neighborhood have, right? In order to have a healthy neighborhood. And begin to change our mindset to say we are going to invest in people. And if every community doesn't have it, that's not good enough. See, it's become palatable. Other people's suffering, other people's misery has become, we've othered them, as opposed to saying zero tolerance for poverty in the United States, zero tolerance for racism. And if we move, instead of saying zero tolerance for the poor, zero tolerance for the homeless, what about zero tolerance for homelessness, right? Zero tolerance for poverty. And so what we're doing with our quality of life agenda is we've actually united organizations across issue, in many cases across race. And one of the things we're calling for in our platform is to actually meet with the Vice President, with Vice President Harris and Governor Walz to say that this is the agenda that we want to see at the federal level, but we also want support for this happening in municipalities. That's why we brought mayors together today. And the reason why we united people across issue is because you have more people power when you actually spread beyond your individual issue. You're stronger. So it's not just my one organization that may care about education. There's a group of people that care about housing. And what we're most concerned about are the values that's fueling those institutions, if that makes sense.
I asked Mr. Brown how important of a role race will play in the 2024 fall elections.
We would be naive to think that racism is not at the core of kind of what America is. It's a hard thing to say, but it's a true thing to say. It's never been rectified. There's never been any accountability for the things that have happened in this country. So a lot of while we may have to talk a little different, a lot of the things that I'm talking to you about, closing 160 schools in Chicago, but ignoring inequity. Saying because we've never had failing schools, but as a public, we've been failed by the school system. Because in Chicago, you can have one child that happens to be white, and there's no acrimony towards the baby that has this, I want to say this, that has, and I know this to be true, they have a school where they're learning Arabic, Mandarin Chinese, Spanish. There are 23 children maximum in every class. The counselor to student ratio is maybe 1 to 80, right? There's a teacher aide in every class. But at the same time, you can go on the west side of Chicago, right? And it's a completely different reality. One teacher aide in the entire building, 40 kindergartners in one class, metal detectors in the school, suspensions instead of counseling. That is how we are viewed, that is living through policy.
Jitu says he harbors no animosity.
We can't have equity if we're not honest. That doesn't mean that because you're white, you have to hate me. Or because I'm black, I have to look at you sideways. Yeah. But what it means is that I shouldn't have to shrink to be in a room with you, right? My truth is my truth. The truth in my community. That young man that's taking pictures right there, that man's been with me since he was 4 years old. You understand? He was this big. And now, but if young men that come from the inner city aren't going to be anything, he lives in Sacramento, California. He runs his own photography studio. He's a husband. You understand what I mean? Right. But and I'm not saying that to you like it's a surprise. I'm saying that to you like it's messed up that it's a surprise to some people. Right. Right?
Right.
So America is like that because America has never owned up to what it's done. And so that's why in many ways that same treatment can continue. That's the same neglect of our basic quality of life institutions can continue. The same colonialism that happens in black communities around the United States can continue. And so what we're calling for, and the coalition that we've built, is multiracial, multi-generational, multi-issue, and we believe providing sort of a blueprint for how we could begin to transform people's lives in their communities.
Jitu Brown is pulling for Vice President Harris.
I think that she is a force right now. I think that she is the right person at the right time. I think that there's there's Obama-like energy, there's 2008-like energy behind her campaign. But no matter who gets in office, our job as organizers is to hold them accountable.
Donald Trump will not get a majority of the black vote, but can he communicate a message that earns enough support to keep Kamala Harris from winning the White House?